Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Ich hab in Gottes Herz und Sinn, which translates to I have surrendered to God's heart and mind. Now this is a pretty straightforward chorale. We have some interesting little modal tidbits like some minor fives and whatnot. Kind of some interesting modulation points as well, but all in all, pretty much everything functions the way that it's supposed to, so I'll just hop right into the analysis. No key signature. We start on A minor, we end on A major, so I reckon the key of the chorale is A minor. However, our first cadence is a perfect authentic cadence, so we're looking for a modulation point to the key of C. It's a perfect authentic cadence in the key of C. We're looking for a point in which we modulate to C, which I don't think happens until later in the phrase. So we start off with our minor tonic, A, C, and E. Then we have E, B, E, and G with the passing seventh in the bass, in the alto. That's a minor 5. We're missing the G sharp here in the melody to make it a major 5. Here we have F, A, C, and A. A couple of passing tones here. This is an F major chord in root position. That's a 6 chord. And then we have C, C, E, and G, and I think that this is where we modulate. 6 wants to go to 3, which can be reanalyzed as 1 in the key of C major. We have a couple of passing tones as well in the bass and the alto. We have E, C, G, and C, which is the same chord, C major, just in first inversion. A couple more passing tones in the lower voices. And then we have G, E, G, and C. We've seen this figuration before where we see a chord inverted or a triad inverted all the way through second inversion as the bass goes up in this stepwise motion. C major over G, and as we're getting ready for a cadence we could expect a C major chord in second inversion. Then we get G, D, G, and B, which is our G major triad, root position, 5 chord. And then we cadence on 1 C major, C, E, G, and C. Perfect authentic cadence. We could also use a bracket here if we want to compare the two chords with one another or to liken them to one another. Some textbooks do that. The next phrase ends with a perfect authentic cadence in the key of A minor, so we're looking for a point in which we modulate back to the key of A minor. We start with the C major chord, no need to reanalyze. We get G, D, G, and B. It's another 5 chord in the key of C major. And then we, instead of going to 1, we get D minor, D, F, F, and A with a couple of passing tones in the bass and the alto, which would be a 2 chord in root position. And I think this is where we modulate back to A minor. We can call that a 4 chord. We get F, A, and D, which is just taking the chord and re-inverting it, or inverting it, not re-inverting it. It was never inverted in the first place, but it's kind of like we have this figure going on here, just in a different part of the measure. But then we get another passing tone in the bass here, and then we get A, E, A, and this D right here is a 4-3 suspension over the bass, but we get a minor chord in root position. Notice how we have the 6 connecting not the leading tone in this case, actually the subtonic connecting the 6 and the 1. Usually we see a leading tone connecting these two, but because that would be F going to G sharp, augmented seconds are pretty uncommon in Bach's music. Not unheard of, but pretty uncommon. Here we get E, E, G sharp, and B. That's an E major triad, root position, passing 7th in the bass. Then we have C, E, A, and C. First inversion A minor triad that gets turned into root position on the next 8th note because the A is in the bass. And then we get E, E, A, and B. This A is a 4-3 suspension over the bass. The G sharp resolves on the next beat, and then we get a delayed 7th here on 4 and before we cadence on A minor. A, C, E, and A. Perfect authentic cadence. Alright, next phrase is actually a perfect authentic cadence, or it ends in a perfect authentic cadence in the key of G major, so we're looking for a point in which we modulate. And because we get F sharps pretty close to the beginning of the phrase, I think this whole phrase is pretty much in the key of G major. Sorry, I wrote an A there. We're in the key of A currently, or A minor. We get A minor here, A, C, E, and A, which I think is our supertonic in the key of G major. We have a passing tone, or a passing seventh in the bass, and a passing tone in the tenor. F sharp, A, D, and A, which is a D major chord in first inversion. It's a 5-6 chord. Passing tone in the alto. Then we have E, D, F sharp, and A. I think this E is an accented non-chord tone. It's really this D we're looking at here. It's a D major triad and root position. And then we have G, D, G, and B, which is our tonic triad, G major and root position. The bass gets this interesting figure I haven't seen before in Bach's music. G, D, G, leading tone, like 1, 5, 1 leading tone in the bass here in the middle of the phrase. It's kind of interesting. But we stay in like the realm of G major, or pretty much voicing a G major chord over the next beat and a half until we get 4 delayed non-chord tones. We have F sharp, D sharp, A, and A, which is a D sharp diminished triad over F sharp, which would be 7, 6 of 6, as D sharp is the leading tone to E. So we would expect a 6th chord afterwards, which we get E, E, G, and B. That's our 6th chord and root position. And we get the same bass figure, leap down a 4th, leap back up a 4th, leap down, or step down. It's kind of interesting. Then we get a passing 7th in the bass here. Then we have C, A, E, and G. That's A minor 7 over C, which is a 2, 6, 5 chord. That kind of gets turned into root position here, but that's not super important because at that point we no longer have a third in the chord, and that's kind of weird in a minor chord. So this is more so just counterpoint at this point. And then we get D, A, D, and F sharp, which is a root position D major triad. And then we get G major, G, B, D, and G. Root position. Perfect authentic cadence. So our next cadence, or the next phrase, ends with a half cadence in the key of A minor. So we're looking for a point in which we modulate. And I think we modulate not straight away, but meaning that the chord doesn't elide. It's not a common chord in the next key. Albeit we could sort of force that perspective onto it, but I think this is like a 5 going to a 1 almost, or like 1 going to 4 in the key of G major. And then once we hear this C, we start to think in the key of A minor, and we can call this C3. And you might actually be wondering, Forrest, how are we in the key of A minor if we see F sharp here? We're coming from G. Well, I think that there's an argument to be made here that, yeah, maybe we still are in the key of G major, and this is more of just like a zone where at the end of the process we end up in the key of A minor, but I think this 3 chord is actually going to F sharp, A, C, and A. This B is a passing tone, and that would be a 6 chord diminished. This would be a byproduct of harmonizing the A melodic minor scale. So we have 6, 6, 4, which is unusual, but nevertheless it is still 3 going to 6. That's where 3 wants to go. It's doing so while sharing a bass, which is kind of interesting, but Bach does interesting things. So we've seen that 6/4 chords don't always operate the way that the textbook tells you they're going to, even though they often do. But I think that that's what's happening here, in this interesting F sharp going to F natural, going back down to E, eventually turns into melodic minor anyways. So this F natural, I feel like, is more of a expressive tone because it ends up being a part of this G sharp fully diminished 7th chord. It's G sharp, D, F, and B, which is 7 fully diminished 7th. So all these chords are contextually relevant to the key of A minor, even though F sharp is not followed by G sharp. So this is an interesting chord progression here, but 3 going to 6 going to 7, that's not the first time we've seen this progression. It's actually somewhat normative. It's not the most common, but it's somewhat common. We would expect the 7 fully diminished chord to go to 1, A, E, and C, which is our 1 chord, A minor in root position. And then we get that D and that F sharp as well. It kind of turns it into like a 4, 6, 5 chord, or 4, 4, 3 chord passing. But I don't think it's super important. Just we can talk about it. If you want to include that, you can in your own analysis if you are analyzing along with me. But then we have E, E, G sharp, and B. That's E major in root position, which is 5, passing 7th in the bass. And then that goes to C, E, A, and A, which is an A minor triad in first inversion. And then we get a couple of passing tones in the lower voices before we get A, C, A, and C, which is like an incomplete A minor triad, but still has all the workings of it. Before we get these interesting non-chord tones here, we get F sharp and D sharp. So we have D sharp, F sharp, A, and A. And we've seen this chord before, right here. Actually, not quite voiced the same way, but similar enough. This would be, instead of being 6, 6 of 6, however, this is, or sorry, 7, 6 of 6. This would be 7, 6 of 5. As a result of the fact that E major, or E is now our 5 in the key of A minor, rather than it being the 6 in the key of G major. And going from 1, and then the secondary dominant of the dominant, especially when the 5 of the chord is in the melody, really sounds like a half cadence. Alright, so the next cadence at the end of the next cadence we have, which is at the end of the next phrase, is a perfect authentic cadence in the key of C major, very similar to the first phrase. Not identical, but similar enough. So we start off with actually E minor, and I think interestingly enough, this is a direct modulation to the key of E minor, and I've been very privy to this since someone's commented on a previous video of mine to look at these cross relations here, and it's much more obvious because the G sharp is going to G natural at the end of or at the beginning of this phrase. However, sometimes if there's no accidental in another one of the voices, say for example this G was in the melody, there would be no accidental and I would still be thinking in E major mode. But this is very much an E minor chord, and I think this is just a direct modulation to E minor. We have a couple of passing tones in the tenor and the melody, and then we get E minor again, so no need to reanalyze. And then we get D sharp, C, F sharp, and A, which is 7 fully diminished in the key of E minor. That's D sharp diminished 7th, before we go to E minor again. And then we get A, C, E, and C, which is an A minor triad in root position. That's our subdominant, with the passing 7th in the bass. I think this is where we modulate to the key of C major. This A minor chord is now 6, and that goes to F sharp, D, A, and C, which interestingly, we see this F sharp again contextualized in a key that isn't G major, just like how we saw here. But this is D7 over F sharp, which is just 5, 6, 5 of 5, because D is the dominant of G, which is our 5, and G is the next chord in the progression, G, D, G, and B. So 5, 6, 5 of 5, going to 5, going to 1. So this F sharp is just a substitution for D minor. It's just a different quality of chord. It changes its function, but it changes its function locally, but in the grand scheme of the progression, it's really just a substitute and functioning the same way. So that's ultimately how secondary dominants really operate anyways. Alright, looking ahead to the last cadence, we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of A minor with that C sharp Picardy third. So we are looking for a point in which we modulate, and I have no reason to doubt the fact that we just straight ahead modulate to the key of A minor, even though this section right here tends to sound kind of ambiguous. It's like kind of like a zone. I think maybe in any point here we could say that a modulation has occurred, but I'm going to go ahead and just say that the phrase straight ahead is A minor. So we have A, E, A, and C. It's our tonic triad in root position. And then we have D, F, A, and B, which is B minor 7 flat 5 over D, which is 2, 6, 5. And then we have some passing tones here. We have E, E, G, and B, which would be kind of like a passing minor 5 actually. And I'll put that in there because 2 wants to go to 5. And then we get F, E, G, and A, which isn't really analyzable using tertian language of this time period. So we have F, D, F, and A, which makes a lot more sense. And we get a little bit of a deceptive progression here. We expect 5 to go to 1, but here it is going to 6. So we have D minor over F. It's like a substitute for, if we look at the bass, it's a deceptive progression, but the chord on top of it is not 6, but 4, 6. And that 4, 6 chord goes to B, D, F, and B, which is another B diminished chord, this time in root position, kind of interesting. passing tones in the lower voices before we get D, B, F, and D again, which is just taking the chord and inverting it, so no need to reanalyze, we'll just change the figured bass. Then we have a couple of passing tones in the upper voices and the tenor, which doesn't really contribute much to the progression, it's just mostly contrapuntal at this point. And then we have G sharp, E, D, and B, which is E7 over G sharp, that's 5, 6, 5, before we leap up to E in the bass. And then we get C, E, C, and C, which is kind of an interesting chord. I think ultimately what's happening here is that really what's being implied is a 1 chord in first inversion, even though we don't have the tonic here, but it's really, actually, I'm going to go and walk that back, and I'm just going to call this 1 because we expect G sharp to go to A. That's how we expect the chord to resolve, but he does so by arpeggiating the triad here, A, C, and E, and the G sharp doesn't immediately go to A, it goes to E, so up that minor sixth, and then down the triad, the minor triad. So I think 1 is what's being implied here, but the C is in the bass here. We don't get a tonic until here. But where it gets broken is the fact that we have a D here as well. So I'll call this 1, 6, and 5, 3, even though this D is a non-chord tone happening on the beat. And we really don't get a resolution until the downbeat of the next measure, and even at that point it's not an A minor triad anymore, it's an E major triad, or at least trying to be an E major triad, E, 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 and B. So we have a tripled root and a fifth, no third yet. The third gets introduced in the tenor on the next beat before we cadence on 1 major, A, C sharp, E, and A, with that Picardy third I was talking about earlier. So this beat right here, just mostly contrapuntal, right? We have C, E, C, and C. So, maybe you do hear a major triad here, but I think the whole gesture of everything with the G sharp and the ear's expectation, whether you know it or not, that you're expecting minor because of the way that everything is structured, it's in the works. Just it's weird to talk about a rootless triad, right? The concept of a chord that doesn't have a root, right? Because in theory that is what it is, but it's in practice when you actually hear it, you're expecting that A, and I would even go as far to say we're kind of fabricating that A the whole time, and then when we hear it, we don't have to focus so much on it anymore. But yeah, I guess technically on the page here we do have a C major triad, which is a rootless A minor triad anyways. But that's pretty much it for today. We have a couple of minor fives, one on the an accented harmonic rhythm, one here in passing, but all in all, really the harmony functions the way that you would expect it to. The cadential structure is pretty straightforward as well. Lots of suspensions, lots of interesting bass figures. We have this bass figure here, which is new. I don't remember it. If we have looked at it, maybe someone can remind me in the comment section if we have seen this from any of the chorales we've looked at before. But I don't recognize it. We have some interesting bass figure here where we go up the triad and rotate it each inversion. It's a pretty cool chorale. It's a very beautiful chorale as well. I like the interplay between like modal minor and tonal minor. It's really cool, and it's refreshing because Bach does not use a lot of minor fives, but when we get them, it's an interesting sound. It blends very naturally into the texture. It doesn't sound like old world music. It sounds very contemporary with the music that Bach has written. So I think it's really cool when we see it, especially when it's injected into an otherwise very structurally tonal chorale. So lots to consider, lots to think about. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. Do consider subscribing to the channel if you like analysis. Tons of videos are scheduled for the future. I upload a video every day with an analysis of a piece of Bach. I'm looking at the chorales, as you can see, and we're not stopping until we finish analyzing all of the chorales that have survived. So we have lots of videos in store. If you have any comments on my analysis or anything that you noticed or anything you'd like me to clarify, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section and I will get back to that. And I think I'll leave the video on that note. Thank you so much again for watching, and I hope you take care.